Tim, icon, legend, I'm not using those terms loosely, transcended his sport. What will you remember from the historic life of Willie?
Well, I'll remember that he's the greatest player that I've ever seen. And with Babe Ruth, he's one of the two greatest players of all time. When he came in 1951, the game had never seen a player quite like him. He became very quickly the greatest combination of power, speed, and defense that the game had ever seen. And here it is, 73 years later, and I believe he still is the greatest combination of power, speed, and defense that ever played the game. He's the only player with a 300 average, 300 homers, and 10 gold gloves, and yet he had 660 homers. He won 12 gold gloves. He would have won 4 more if they had handed them out earlier. He is the greatest base runner I've ever seen. He is the greatest defensive center fielder of all time. He won a gold glove in center field at age 37. Johnny Bench put it best when I said, Johnny, tell me about Willie Mays. He said he was magical, he was perfect. And anyone who saw him play, and I saw him play growing up, will tell you he's the greatest player they've ever seen. That's who Willie Mays is.
I saw him a little later than Timmy did, so I became a Giant fan. I'm wearing a Giant tie today for him in the late 60s, 68, 69, 70. So I didn't see Willie like Tim did in his heyday. But the two things that you love about Willie that I mentioned already today, one, him playing stickball with the kids in Harlem when he was a Giant. He'd come out, he'd play stickball, play for 2 hours, then he'd go up to the Polo Grounds to play a ball game, buy all the kids ice cream, hear these great shots. Look at this shot, Steve. I mean, this is great. This is Willie Mays. Look at the big smile. He's playing stickball with all his buddies, buying the kid ice creams after the game. I mean, name me a baseball player who does that. Go ahead. Not many, I can promise you. Right. And, you know, everybody gets a kick out of him watching that. You're going to see the ice creams here in a minute. That's number one. And then number two, and I mentioned this before, which is interesting. You know, remember, there was a huge fight. There's the ice cream. There's a huge fight in 65, which Timmy may have actually seen, between the Dodgers and the Giants. Now, that rivalry in 1965 is at its heyday. That's the Johnny Roseboro. Here it is. Look at this. Look at Juan Marichal with the bats hitting Roseboro. Look at that. You know who broke that fight up? Willie. He brought Roseboro, who was the guy that Marichal was going after, into the Dodger dugout and said, Johnny, let's calm down. Let's not make this worse than it is. Let's not make this a scene that you can't believe. Look at Marichal with Roseboro, Stevie. Wow. All carrying bats. Who broke that up? Mays in 1965. I mean, those are the two things that listen, Timmy knows him about the baseball a lot better than I do. Those are the two things that I was thinking about last night with the great Willie, is those two instances.
One of the things, first of all, let me say this. Never saw him play. Only saw the highlights. And please put Tim Kurkjian up on the screen so I can see him while I'm talking about this. Never saw him play, only the highlights. But my dad, God rest his soul, was a baseball historian. Coming from the Virgin Islands in the 50s, you know, in a position to play professional baseball, but my mother was pregnant with my older sister, Linda, and so because of that back then, you had to work because it was but so much money that you were going to earn, and that's why that didn't happen for him. He talked about no one more than Willie Mays. He religiously would tell me Willie Mays was the greatest player who ever lived. But I want to take this a step further. One of the things that's very popular in the world of sports, when you call somebody the greatest, you think about Muhammad Ali. You think about Muhammad Ali primarily because of the adversity he faced and how he performed in the face of that adversity. Well, take into account Willie Mays. We think about a lot of the great players, great athletes of our time. It could be Jim Brown. It could be Bill Russell. It could be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The list goes on and on. Willie Mays was the one who was born in the South. He was born in Alabama in 1931. We know and we can only imagine the level of vitriol that he experienced. And then I'm reading my research about him, and I'm reminded that in 1950, Tim Kurkjian, he went from playing in the Negro Leagues to playing for the all-white Trenton Giants as the only person of color in the entire Interstate League. So just imagine what he faced. And in the end, Mad Dog Russo gets to come on national television and talk about how he broke up a fight where guys were whaling bats in 1965. We're able to look at 660 career home runs. Tim Kurkjian reminds the world this morning, along with Buster Olney, about how there were two seasons he didn't even play because he was serving in the military. So he would have eclipsed Babe Ruth's home run record. He would have surpassed, in all likelihood, the 700 since he hit over 25 home runs, at least 25 home runs, like 13, 14 seasons. He would have surpassed Babe Ruth's record before Hank Aaron ever did. He would have done that, they're projecting, by the year 1972, of course. All of those things are the kind of things that I take into consideration, particularly on a day like today, recognizing his level of greatness, what he meant to the sport, what he meant to the world of sports, the discipline that he exercised when the vitriol, similar to what Jackie Robinson had experienced, was being thrown in his direction, and greatness and composure and class all shine through anyway. God bless him and his family. God bless his soul.
Tim.
And Stephen A., you're exactly right. He saw some really bad things along the way, and yet it never affected him. We heard Ken Griffey Jr. talk about being approached by Willie Mays when he was 17 years old and what it meant to him. Reggie Jackson told me the first time he met Willie Mays, he couldn't even speak. He was in such reverence of Willie Mays. When Johnny Bench made the All-Star team for the first time in 1968, Willie Mays, his teammate on the NL team, whispered in his ear, "You should be starting this All-Star game." And for Johnny Bench, that was a thrill of a lifetime, because now his career was validated, that the greatest player he had ever seen is telling him, not only do you belong on the All-Star team, you should be starting in the All-Star game. That Willie carried no hatred and no anger, at least outwardly, about what he went through. He just made everyone around him feel even better. There are hundreds of stories like that, and that speaks to Willie Mays, the man, even more so than Willie Mays, the spectacular player.
Mad Dog, before you jump in here, one quick question for you, Stephen A. As a black man, what does Willie Mays represent to you?
Everything that I just pointed out. I mean, just the level of discipline, the level in the face of such adversity, just a reminder, particularly on a day like today, Juneteenth, and what it represents. There's so many things going on in the hearts and the minds of African Americans in this country. We all know this. We've all lamented it. We've all talked about it time and time and time again. Great guys, excellent historians like Mad Dog Russo and Tim Kurkjian have highlighted and, chronicled these things along the way with their superb reporting as well. But in the end, what it comes down to is that no matter what you're going to endure, you have to maintain composure. You have to weather storms in order for progress to be made. And Willie Mays personified that in everything that he did, everything that till the day he died. And just look at the lives that he affected. You talk about Barry Bonds, you talk about Ken Griffey Jr., you talk about a plethora of other players. Look at Aaron Judge speaking about him and others. You were in the presence of reverence. Mm-hmm. You know that you were going to defer, and you know that you were standing in the presence of reverence with this man and what he represented. He was every bit as important as Jackie Robinson was to the sport of baseball and to sports overall.
I love this play, 1970. Timmy remembers it. Bobby Tolan at the plate. This is the Saturday game of the week. Now watch this catch that Mays makes. 375 right center field. There's Bobby Bonds. Look at that catch.
Yes.
He's 39 years old, guys. He's not 29. That is an incredible. Can you show that? I just told him.
Wow. Right
center at Candlestick. This is in April, Molly.
Right.
Yeah.
There's Bobby Bonds, Barry's father, and there's Willie climbing a wall. That is an incredible play. And I remember that play live.
He's why you became a Giants fan?
Yeah, he is, 1968. Timmy, you remember this famous play, Tim? That's as good a play as you're ever going to see, is it not?
Of course it is, and he made some of the greatest plays of all time. He made the greatest play in the history of postseason baseball in the '54 World Series on the catch he made against Vic Wertz. Bob Feller was pitching for the Indians on that team, and he told me years later it wasn't that great of a catch because they knew Willie Mays was going to run that ball down because they knew how great he was, and Willie was incredibly humble. He told me once, though, the Vic Wertz play wasn't even one of the 10 best plays that he ever made. That's how good he was. People lose sight of the fact of his base running and his defense and everything else. And the other thing that people don't know about Willie Mays is he had the strongest pair of hands I have ever seen in my life. Dwayne Kuiper, former Major League player, broadcaster for the Giants, told me that his dad used to say to Dwayne, always win the handshake. And Dwayne said with Willie Mays, you couldn't win the handshake because he had the strongest hands that anyone has ever seen. That's at least the first time I shook Willie Mays' hand. I went, oh my gosh, there it is, those incredibly strong hands that led to all those home runs, all those hits, everything.
Remember about that catch. That's the 8th inning, World Series Game 1. Giants are a huge underdog. It's 2-2. It's 511 feet to straightaway center field. Willie was a high school quarterback in Birmingham. His hero was Joe DiMaggio. Forget the catch, the throw. Look at this throw. There's a man at second base. The game's 2-2. It's 511 feet. And he got that throw in, and the guy could not score from second base. That's Larry Doby, by the way, who couldn't score at second base.
How many feet was that?
511 into the alleyway, in the straightaway. Yeah. So right there, it's about 480. And he made that throw into the plate. Look at that. That is an incredible throw under the circumstances.
You brought this up, and I want to ask you and Tim Kurkjian this question. Could you explain to me why back in the 50s and the 60s, something is an alley 480 feet, it's over 500 feet.
It's crazy.
And we're seeing stuff at 300 feet in baseball parks today. I mean, what am I missing something? Am I missing something? I just want to know. I just want to know.
Stephen A., you're not missing anything, and we can't forget, and Dog has already brought this up, Willie played the majority of his home games at Candlestick Park, where it was cold all the time, and it was windy all the time. It was a terrible ballpark in which to hit for a right-handed hitter. If he had played in a hitter-friendly park, he would have hit another 100 home runs. I'm certain of that. He also hit 4 home runs in one game in Milwaukee. And Lon Simmons, the broadcaster of the Giants, told me, he said if the wind hadn't been blowing in that night, he would have hit 5 home runs in one game. Lon Simmons once told me that Willie was so good. He said the fans of the Giants expected a miracle from him every day. And he said he just gave them a miracle every other day. That's how great Willie Mays was.
And he was sick, too, before that 4 home run game. He had food poisoning, and he wasn't even going to play. And then he goes out there and hits the 4 home runs. Timmy, I love this story quickly. We have a minute here. I love the story of the '62 World Series. That's the Yankees and the Giants. It's 7th game in San Francisco. They had a lot of rain. They had 3 rainouts. It's 1-0 Yankees in the bottom of the 9th. So Matty Alou with 2 out walks. So Mays is up. So Mays hits a double down the right field line. The rain prevented the ball from going all the way to the wall, so Matty Alou didn't score. He ended up at third, Willie at second. McCovey hit the line drive to second base to end the World Series, and the Yankees won. They asked Willie after the game, Willie, if you were on base and somebody hit a double, would you have scored to tie it up? He said, I would have scored, and I would have been shampooed and showered.
That's a good one.
I love it. Ending on a high note. Talk about a legacy and a life well lived. Tim, thank you so much for being with us. So appreciate having you this morning. Willie Mays, baseball legend, and arguably the greatest player to ever play the game, dead at the age of 93. Our hearts and prayers are with all his loved ones.